This is the Brock and Dave Driller Cast. I'm Brock Yordy, and I got my favorite co-host friend, Dave Bowers. Say hello, Dave.
How you doing, man?
Doing great. This is going to be our Halloween podcast, and yes, you should be listening to it sometime around now and Christmas, depending on how you're catching up. We appreciate everybody listening. Today, we want to talk about some safety, some tribalism, honoring the dead because it's Halloween, and just continuing to promote our community with good choices. So we're going to jump right into it with safety. And it's Halloween, and I think of watching horror movies and different series on TV, and those mind-blowing moments where you got to look away from the television because it's just too graphic, it's too much. And I think about, I've had those moments on job sites. There was a gentleman that fueled a pump hot, and it flashed and burned his hand to the point that he had to go to the burn center and get cadaver skin put on his hand for 6 weeks, and was just one of those where it looked like he had a broken glove on his hand. And the first thing I want to say is, we're drillers, we're operators, we work on job sites, and we're not doctors. So even if we look at it and we think maybe we know what we should be doing to help our colleague out, in this situation, as they called the emergency hotline and started the process, they ran to the safety first aid kit and pulled out burn cream, and they smeared his hand in burn cream. And when he got to the emergency room, guess what they got to do? They got to scrape all of that burn cream off and clean his hand, because he was beyond the idea of, I just bumped the muffler or I got a bad sunburn, and they needed to clean it, and they couldn't clean it with him having any sort of local, painkiller. So the burn itself was awful, and every time I see the picture, I shudder. But then he also got to the emergency room, and they scraped his hand clean. And Dave, what would you have done different?
Well, unfortunately, again, I'm not a EMT or anything. I may not see the difference. You see burn cream, right? So you might think that that's the way to go. But anytime someone has that serious of an injury, what we should be doing is trying to get them emergency medical treatment immediately. Because, again, do we have the training? Even if we have the training, do we have everything we would need on hand for a catastrophic injury? And that's something we should be looking into. What does our first aid kit look like on our rig? Do we have tourniquets? Do we have the things that we would need in case we had that horrible injury happen to save that person's life that we've been working with? Right? I had a minor injury on a job that happened to me that turned into a major injury for somebody else. I had a engineer with us from somewhere in the Mideast, and I had smashed my finger bad enough that I had bleeding under my nail. So what do you do for bleeding under your nail? It hurts. You heat up a pin or a paper clip or whatever you have, right? And you go through the nail and relieve that pressure, and that's what I did. So I don't know if he didn't know what we were about to do or what. He was standing there. We were mud rotary, and I'm heating it with the torch, go through it, and the blood squirts out, which is what you expect to happen. This guy sees that, passes out and hits his head on the mud side of the mud tank. So now I wind up going to the hospital. This guy, wound up getting 7 stitches. And, again, had to be cleaned out because he hit it on the side of the mud tank. And I was always one. I didn't do everything maybe as cleanly as I should have. You hurt yourself, you put it in the mud tank because it's cool in there. That's probably not the best place to go. But when you don't have clean water or you don't have a unlimited water supply, we do things, again, that rough and tumble attitude rather than doing the right thing. But back to my original point, we really have to treat, especially you gentlemen that work out west, right? You work where you might be an hour and a half, 2 hours from a real hospital. The guys up in BC, coring. You might be a long way from a real hospital, or anybody else who's listening anywhere else in the world where you're remote. You have to treat your drilling operation as a standalone to the best you can. You have to be able to give whatever immediate life-saving measures that you can. Part of that is make sure you're current on first aid CPR, right? Go to those classes. If you have somebody who is willing to, maybe, give them a little bump or a little bonus if they were willing to take that next level of class and learn some emergency, some EMT stuff. It can't hurt your company. It can only help you, and actually it'll save you money in the long run, because if every crew has an EMT level trained, and it's hard to do and it costs a little money, has an EMT level trained person, then your insurance rates, you can show that the insurance company and drive those rates down. And, money drives everything. So that's not a bad idea. Not everybody can pull it off, but it's one of the things that I kind of learned from working with you and the Red Horse and the U.S. Army, that rather than have a crew that's just qualified to go out and make the water come out of the ground, they make sure they have a crew that's qualified to make the water come out of the ground and do any basic or mid-advanced first aid that could have to be done, because they understand it's a dangerous profession.
And Dave, you've said a couple things there that are very important that I want to hit home on. First off, our first aid kit needs to be a legit first aid kit that we're restocking. I want everybody listening that the following morning that you're with everybody, I want you to say, go to your first aid kits, check them out, tell me what's in there. And if it's a bunch of Band-Aid wrappers and the latex gloves and that shiny blanket thing that you put on if somebody's cold or whatnot, that's all that's left. You need to replace that, because blue paper towels and electrical tape is not an effective first aid kit. So we take for granted that we live in a first world nation that has a really good triage system. But Dave said give a bonus if you go out and you get your American Red Cross first aid and you start learning your triage and you start, well, those guys that are working remote, we should know when we show up on a job site where the closest hospital is, what's the fastest emergency response. Because all too often I hear the story that, well, we threw Bobby into the back of the pickup truck and we took off. And then we couldn't find we go to an urgent care and the urgent care goes, we're not set up to help you with that. Because again, guys, we're not doctors. So it comes back to understanding the distance to the hospital. And then if the distance is too great, we have to have somebody on site that can perform enough triage until the helicopter shows up or the ambulance or the first responder, because that's the thing, is we need to know enough to be able to stabilize our colleague and make sure, mind you, we don't train for this. So when all of this goes bad, you have to be able to dedicate and go, Brian, call 911. I'm going to be with Bobby. Get the first aid kit, shut the rig down, all of the steps that are happening, because this comes back to our Cooper's Colors discussion. We're in black. We are reacting so fast that we have to think about these things. Now,
Well,
for the US, for the OSHA says that in any type of job discipline that is crushing, rotating, electrocution, falls, that emergency response is supposed to be, I'm going to butcher this, but I think it's either less than 15 minutes away or less than 5 minutes. And I believe it's less than 5 minutes away. So if we can't call 911, not to mention we all use Google Maps now and we don't know where we are. And when we call 911, it bounces off to another cell phone tower. It goes to places. Go ahead, Dave.
Can I interject something here? All right. 15 minutes is what the response time should be to emergency medical response. However, the important thing about that, you're not always 15 minutes from the nearest fire station, something like that. So that means when we're that distance, we have to be able to self-respond.
Yes.
And then when we call that 911 and we get that fire department, we now have to, that rig's in the middle of nowhere. So we have to have already looked on our HASP, right? Our self-health and safety plan for that site should show where we intend to meet first responders. So that guy who calls may have to drive away from the rig to go meet and stay on with them, so he follows him directly to the injury site so that they're not overlooking, hey, there's a mast over there. How do we get over there? And then what if it's the mast for a different drill, right? There's a lot of sites that, depending on the type of work we're doing, there could be multiple drill rigs set up in a, 3 square mile area out in the middle of nowhere, that the first thing that they see is not where the injury is. So we have to make sure we meet them and we escort them to the injury. And that, that's not always easy to tell somebody, okay, I'm going to get, if you have a 2-man crew or 3-man crew, I'm going to leave here and go meet them. That's hard for the injured person and for the person being left on his own to care for him to take, but it's a necessary step. We have to look at these things, because think about the drillers Think about the drillers. First gentleman that I met in drilling after I got into it, maybe not first, but one of the first, a guy named Jay Fagley, I met him. He's missing his arm from his elbow down. When that injury happens, something like that, if you don't respond well, you truly have that gentleman's life is dependent on how well we react.
Well, and that's exactly it, Dave. How many of us actually have a true triage kit on site with tourniquets? Not zip ties, not duct tape, not a belt, but real tourniquets. The Air Force, the Army, when their medics started looking at how we did drilling and whatnot, they started putting together, first aid kits that were no different than what a special operator would take in, that would need to be able to stop bleeding, be able to do a tourniquet, take somebody that's incapacitated and be able to move them. We're in those same situations, and we can be great drillers. We can be very smart people, but we're not doctors, and we need to be able to train in a way that we can stabilize a colleague when things go bad.
Well, the best thing we can do is not let things go bad. But we know that if we do everything that you brought up, OSHA, we do every single thing that OSHA says to do, we do it by a T. People are going to still get hurt and possibly killed. OSHA is the minimum wage for safety. That's all it is. None of us will want to work for minimum wage. Hell, there's maybe a few exceptions, but our helpers in this industry shouldn't be working entry level, never done it before. It shouldn't be minimum wage work. Otherwise, we can't retain them. And that's all we're talking about with safety, right? OSHA is just our minimum wage. We at least have to do this, but we should be smarter than a minimum wage person.
That's working at Jeffco. I got to meet several people that had gotten injured on rigs. One gentleman told a story about how he jumped up on the winch to ride it up with a chainsaw in one hand and his hand on the cables. And the driller drug his left arm through the top shifts. Oh, by the way, after they got him to the hospital and got through that situation, the investigation, not to mention when they went back to SRAM on the investigation, it was found that that wasn't an appropriate way to be using the winch or something that he should have been doing. And the ticket on not having proper fall protection on. But now we got a man that had little use of his left arm. A horrible situation because it could have went much worse. And I know stories of much worse. That's another one of those shuddering moments when I looked at that guy's arm. But, insurance suddenly didn't cover it because it was negligence.
Well, beyond that, right, just understanding what we should do, right? You see a lot of pictures of drill rigs and boatman's chairs, right? Boatman's chair is not legal anywhere anymore, right? You need to use a man basket, and then we need to test. Any lift needs to be tested to 125% capacity, and before we lift a person, and that's not always, doesn't really make a lot of sense with a drill rig. Those machines aren't designed for lifting personnel. There's no drill rig manufacturer that lifting personnel is part of it. And if we bring in I've got a picture I've been using for our Haswapper refresher of a gentleman with a boom truck, and a guy riding the ball on the boom truck to do, what he's doing? They're changing flags at a car dealership. Now there is one place that'll still allow you to ride the ball, Michigan OSHA. I don't know how they allow it still, but I know somehow guys from Michigan, believe it or not, can ride the ball. But nowhere else in the country can you ride the ball. It doesn't make any sense. You probably,
it's for steel. It's steel workers. I was up in. I was in northeast Michigan, the Lower Peninsula, working on a job, and I was listening to these guys talk about riding the ball. And I think I even texted you, Dave, and I went, I didn't think this was still legal, and they were allowed to do it as steel workers or shipbuilders, or there was
iron workers.
So
yeah, and they're allowed to do it for some reason. And all I can figure is that iron workers bounce. All I can figure, right?
Maybe they got a tail. Maybe they land on their feet.
Maybe, but no. All in all, right? I can't imagine a more dangerous thing to do.
Well, explain riding the ball to anybody.
Right, so on a crane, obviously, that you need head weight, right? You need headache weight, because you can't let same as a drill rig. We can't let the rope slacken, or it's going to damage the rope. It's going to not wrap right, all this stuff. So in order to do that, on the whip line of a crane, the one that's not reeved into a block, on the whip line, they have a heavy, usually 150, 200-pound ball that is got a swivel on the bottom of it for the hook, and then it's hooked into a becket, or what I would call a wedge socket. Old school crane operators call it a becket because I believe the Beckett company was who designed it. Hooked into the top with a becket. You can stand on top of that round swivel ball and ride holding the cable with your hand and your feet against the cable with the ball and ride up to whatever spot the crane operator is going to let you step off. It's not usually used for anything other than an elevator that way, but I'm shocked. I mean, if you look at the old pictures from the 30s, you see that stuff quite a bit. Sometimes riding a piece up, right? That they're going to work on the iron, but it's iron workers, right? Holding on to the cable, riding the piece up. But these are the same guys that there's famous pictures of them showing them over the skyline of Manhattan, sitting on the beam having lunch, that were throwing red hot rivets to each other, catching it, the bucket, set it up there, and you trust the guy next to you to swing with a sledgehammer while he's standing on a beam that wide, 6 inches wide, swing with a sledgehammer and hit exactly where that rivet is to put those pieces together. The talent it took was amazing, but at that time, for every $1 million spent, they figured 15 lives would be lost.
So it wasn't talent; it was attrition. And the people that were still doing it, they were good because they hadn't fallen to their death.
Yes, and it was only a matter of time before they did, right? So they used to figure every $1 million spent, like I said, was 15 lives. The first job that was challenged was the Golden Gate Bridge. The Golden Gate Bridge, they built the Golden Gate Bridge, but they built a net underneath it. So when you did fall building the Golden Gate Bridge, you landed in the net, and I believe there was, I want to say, don't quote me, I probably shouldn't quote a number, but there were like 18 or 25 guys that started a club called the Halfway to Hell Club, and that club, how you got in that club is you fell during construction of the Golden Gate Bridge and were saved by the net. But so that's
$1 million per 15 deaths is $66,000 a man. 60. You know what's odd about that, everybody? It's Halloween. It's 66,666.666.
It's Halloween, man.
So that with inflation, that's a $700,000 man now.
Yeah, and unfortunately, if you have a fatality on your job, you have one of your employees die, it might run into those costs of what we're talking about. It might run into that 700, not that the fines or any of that, but where the costs come from. You now have crews that are traumatized. You may have the owner of a company, who now his mind isn't where it should be because it's, I had to go talk to that wife, to that son, to that whatever, because of a mistake that maybe he made, maybe a crew under his, right? So all these things, it changes everything the way that they were doing things for long enough. It costs a ton of money that's not the OSHA fine, that's not what the funeral costs, that's not any of those things.
And beyond that, Dave, it's a nationwide precedence now, and I can think of a couple stories. The first one was a year ago, the gentleman in Boston that had the two guys in the ditch, the trench collapse, and they died after the investigation, after everybody had mourned and the bodies were in the ground and, all of that. The prosecutor nailed him with manslaughter, and he went to prison. And
He
it
should
just
have.
happened again this year. So supervisors, as you're thinking, I'm not going to be the puss, and you know what, we're a rough and tough industry, and if those guys want to do it that way, I'll let them do it that way. You are 100% accountable. We're all accountable for being safe. But the leader on site, when it's done and the investigation starts, and if it gets into a criminal investigation, you're going to jail.
Well, yeah, but let me just say, because I've done research on that accident, that gentleman should be in jail because what he allowed someone to do, and I don't think there's anybody listening here that would allow their people to do this. They went under where they were undermined. They undermined the street, went through a small hole, and went back with dirt over top of them to work on a live. I don't remember if it was sewer main or water pipe, which wound up bursting, filling the hole. It was a water pipe, filling the hole with water before they could get out. And because they were undermined down into a hole they dug. They came here, and if you've ever run a vac truck, if you look for something, okay, here's our problem. Well, that wasn't where the problem was. So instead of opening up the street more, because that takes time, they just started tunneling sideways. Anyone who would allow somebody to do that is saying, I don't care about your life, I care about this money. And so anything that happens to that gentleman in prison, any money he's lost, anything like that, I'm sorry, he deserves everything that happened to him.
That's not the story I'd heard, but that's terrifying. And, you hope that our people make good choices and they say, no, I'm not going to go down there and do that. The project I heard was behind schedule, was over budget. He was under great scrutiny to get the job done. And there were a lot of near misses and a lot of shortcuts being taken. And
All of those things are accurate, but I'm just talking about what he did at that moment, because that's why it was his OSHA stuff was all willful violation. Right? It was all willful because he had similar citations in the past, and he did nothing to change their way of doing business.
So you talked about riding the ball, and I'm gonna jump us around, but I know we just had a discussion we were looking at on social media and looking at winch cables, and a guy said, "Hey, I got this problem going on." Let me pull up the. Well, I did have it. Let's talk about it, Dave. Let's.
Right.
We're a tribal industry, and what we do is we're self-taught. We're very good at what we do. Sometimes we throw out science, and we act like children that have determined that the sky is blue because there's blue birds that painted it that way. And this is that situation of we either know what we know or we know what somebody else has told us on a job site, and now somehow that's become fact. Just like the misinformation that we get on anything else, we endanger folks by going off of bad information. If it's not running a 5-gas meter on a project that there's a chance you're going to run into H2S, we should all have 5-gas meters on our rigs. It should be imperative. Tell me, who's got a 5-gas meter and who's got it calibrated and who's treating it right? Because
the more common meter is a 4-gas meter, right? That does oxygen, carbon monoxide, H2S, and then it can do upper explosive limit. That's the most common meter. They make a 5-gas, but usually when you run a 5-gas, you're near a chemical company, something like that, that they have a compound of concern that they can specifically say, okay, we're looking for this. A 5-gas, to me, doesn't make a lot of sense for a drilling contractor, but a 4-gas meter, which is the most common one, it'll do all the common things that we can check for. That's the meter I think that we need, because those things I listed, oxygen, we always check for oxygen first anytime we're going down into a trench or in a confined space. Why? Because if we don't have oxygen down there, which means, and not just oxygen, it has to be great. In order to enter, it's got to be greater than 19.5%. But normally there's 20.9 roughly, unless, of course, you're at elevation. There might be a little less. You might have a 20.7, 20.6, something like that, of what your background oxygen is. Well, then what happens, if I stick a meter down there and it's above 19.5, but it's not 20.9, if that's my background, I still have concern because something replaced that other percentage. So, that's when we check for the next thing, right? The next thing that machine checks for is, and that's the bell ringing, because I hit my foot on my stool. The next thing we're going to check for, we need to check for explosive gas.
Yep.
And is that explosive gas between the lower and upper explosive limit? And depending on the type of gas it is, that couple percent of oxygen that's gone, if that's been replaced with an explosive gas, we need to know that, because then we went from having a danger of low oxygen possibility. Now there's a danger of explosive engulfment. Then we want to check for carbon monoxide and H2S, because either one of those, if we go down there, is gonna incapacitate us. And we have worked with all the people we work with for a long time. I'm in my 50s. A lot of the gentlemen out there listening are in their late 40s, 50s, early 60s. If I'm down in a trench and I go down, that person working with me is going to suspect something first. Is he going to suspect bad atmosphere? If they've done this work 1,000 times and no one's ever been sick before and it went down before, I go down, he's going to think I had a heart attack. He's going to try to come in and save me, and guess what? There's another one. Right? There are instances in confined space, especially, where multiple people have went in as a would-be rescuer, and so by the time EMS gets in there, there's 3, sometimes 4 people down in there, and now we have multiple fatalities. It is a hard thing to do, to watch. I was once teaching a class, a hydro excavation class, and talked about this, exactly what I had just said, and don't be. And the guy raised his hand and he said, "How?" I says, "What do you mean?" He goes, "We had that situation. And so we held our breath and I went in and got him." And I go, "Okay, well, I'm glad that you saved him, but you took a risk that could have killed you." And he says, "Well, how do you not do it? You've known that person." I says, "Well, the only way I can think of to not do it is this. I see that and I picture my wife, my kids. I understand they have a family. If we can get something to them as quick as possible, get EMS on their way, find a way to try to ventilate the space, start blowing air in there, because they might not have major damage yet. They might be passed out, right? Because we can still be living without brain damage at relatively low oxygen levels.
For 14 or 15 minutes.
Yeah.
So we visualize it like drowning, and it's not like drowning. The brain is much more resilient in that situation than you are if your lungs are full of water and you're on, that. So it's
when your lungs are full of water, you're getting 0%. And that's the problem, right? When down here, your body is still taking what it can. Now, you might wind up sick if it's carbon monoxide. Your body actually prefers carbon monoxide to oxygen for some reason. The way it works in your blood, your body actually would rather have it, even though it'll kill them. It does. It's just how the system works. It's like, hey, that stuff's nice, but it doesn't work right, you know. So anyway, we need to understand that it's our family we have to worry about in that situation. We want to make sure we try to save that person, but that's the only way I can think of that, you know, these people might be like family. Maybe you work with them forever. They could be family. But you have to, you know, I know that I would struggle if it was one of my sons in that position. I would struggle with that.
So no, you wouldn't, because you would have the proper air quality meter. You would have a tether. You would have a three-man system. You know, some of these confined space deaths come from working alone, which I just cannot condone. I know that we have jobs that we go on by ourselves, but even when we're by ourselves, we should have the customer or somebody with us. But we surely shouldn't be going into a confined space. But there's tethers, there's ventilation systems, and there's the meters, and everything is there to prepare us to be able to get through the job safely. And I said 5-gas because I worked on a lot of refineries and in chemical plants on drilling jobs where we were required to have that additional and understand.
Well, they knew what that additional compound of concern was, and that's the important part of that 5-gas meter, right? They know what it is. They know what the hazard is. So that fifth one, right, could be that you're required to wear a personal monitor for a specific compound of concern. I've had to wear them quite often. But the reason I'm saying I would struggle in that position, you're right, professionally, the chances of me getting in that position with my sons, low, right? I'm going to do everything I can, and I'm sure everybody else out there would. And we're talking about drilling, but I'm going to switch it for a second to stuff that we all deal with, right? We have farms, we have different. Think of your work practices at home compared to what they are at the job. You don't have all the same stuff there a lot of times. And, you know, one of the most famous, you know, things that was ever said to a buddy of mine who's a safety guy, he was cutting a tree or doing something, and he's leaning over on a ladder like every one of us does. Leaning over, got a chainsaw, not doing stuff right. And his wife, who's a nurse, comes out and she's got the phone in her hand. He goes, what are you doing? She goes, well, you know, I can't wait to call the ambulance and tell them that our safety guy that lives here just got hurt because he's a dumbass. But we do things at home. Sometimes we don't apply the same principles that we should be, stuff at home to stuff at work. I'm hoping that none of us ever have to look at these kind of things and make these choices.
You know,
I don't want these choices made.
I have known a lot of good industry professionals who have gotten killed on holiday weekends, have gotten killed cutting wood, electrocution on an electrical job, didn't contact 811 and make sure that where they were about to put in the patio was safe. Things that we hit home on because we're worried about liability insurance and the fines, not about that $666,000 value that we've put on our 1930s steelworkers. And in order for us to be great leaders and have integrity, we have to operate safely because it's the right thing to do, not because it's the rules.
Well, I always put this back to what I call personal liability. It's not liability about what the cost or any of that. I have to sleep at night. Right? I'm in large facility, and I've been tasked with the safety department. Part of that is, when you see something not being done right, that's my job to make sure that it gets fixed. And I don't have the authority to fix it, right? I have to make sure the people with the authority know about it and can. Right? But sometimes that means 200, 250 people that are out there running equipment, doing things that are dangerous. I have to, if something bad happens, if I were to see it and not rectify it, I have to go to sleep. I have to know that I've done everything I can. I'll give a little experience this week. And this will lead me to the next thing I want to talk about. It leads back to our triage thing. I had to make a phone call this week and tell my coordinator that there was a potential that I had an exposure to COVID. Unlikely. My son's best friend left for the military. My son went to a dinner with him the night before he left. He came over here. I always called him number 4 because I have 3 sons and he lived here. If my son wasn't at his house, they were here. So I always called him number 4. Took him wherever with us. Come over to say goodbye that night. Left for the military. 7 days into being at base, he tested positive. It had been 12 days since the day that I said goodbye to him. 12 days isn't 14, which is the CDC's recommendation. So I made a phone call and said, hey, there's a possibility of exposure. This is what went on. Okay. So I recused myself. The chances are he got it at the base. I worked from home yesterday, Friday, right? By time Monday rolls around, it'll be past the 14 days. There's not been any symptoms, not anything for anybody. So I'm relatively sure everything happened at the base. But had I not said anything, it's been 12 days, I don't have anything, I'm good. And somebody at the site got sick because I was asymptomatic, I have to live with that, right? Not to mention, it getting into our facility could lead eventually, if it spread, to the facility being closed down for a second time, because we are now going into a wave larger. If you study the 1918 pandemic, we're going into a wave that's going to possibly be, and not possibly, it's going to be larger than our initial wave that shut down the country.
And before
I another point I'd like to make, if you let me.
I want to talk COVID. So if you're taking us away from COVID, I want to talk.
No, we're not going away from COVID. We're doubling down a little bit. So since that wave is going to happen, it's already starting to tax hospitals. And if you listen to the Drilling Insight podcast that Brock and I did with Jeremy Verduzco, I don't know, this is probably 3 months ago now, 4 months ago.
March.
It was in March, okay. We talked at that time about somebody not being able to get emergency services at a hospital, being sent to the fire department to get triage done, and then sitting for 12, 14 hours before he could get anything done. That is coming back. And unfortunately, not only is it coming back, it's coming back for the most part nationwide. The areas that were not affected by the first spike are being greatly affected now. Many of those areas are those areas that we're talking about where somebody's out in the middle of nowhere. Those places also have small hospitals because the population density is low there. So it's not going to take a lot to overwhelm these systems. And when they become overwhelmed, we no longer, for our anything non-life threatening, we don't have access anymore.
So I flew this week. I flew Kalamazoo to Detroit, Detroit to Tampa, because I took the family back to Michigan, and I knew they're actually trying to FaceTime me right now. I needed to get back to be on a project, and so I flew. I flew for the first time since June, and I only flew in June because it was an emergency. And we haven't had this story, but I flew Tallahassee to Dallas, Dallas to Oklahoma on an American. And Tallahassee, being a state capital of Florida, was pretty smart about travel. You know, this is still before we've come out with much more information than we have, but you know, smarter than what we were in March and April. I get to Dallas. Dallas was the Wild West. God bless Texas, and I've lived in Spring, the Woodlands, working for Bayreuth, and I enjoyed my time in Texas. But damn it, wear a mask. I get to the Dallas airport. There's 10% of us wearing masks. The rest are, you know, this thing's over. We're moving on. I go to get on my flight from Dallas to Oklahoma City with American, and it was oversold. They were asking for 6 people to take a later flight, which means that the flight that I booked, that I was told that the middle seats wouldn't be there and we would be in a better condition, was not true. And so I flew that flight, and I sat there with my mask on, and I even had latex gloves on, and I was huddled in my bubble. And it was miserable because of it was a bubble that I didn't want to be in with the people around me. And so now I'll fast forward, you know, I flew this week, and Delta did everything right. You know, everybody was social distanced, and it's costly to do it that way. We wore masks. They talked about the way they're sanitizing and everything they're doing to be able to maintain us doing business. And we're essential workers. But it only works if we're also maintaining our responsibility to this. No different than the 4 or 5 gas meter and going into that confined space, that I don't care if you think that it's not real and anybody can beat it and we're in a first world civilization. It is affecting people, and it's bigger, and we need to fact check, and we need to look at things, and wearing masks is a social responsibility for humanity. And just like Dave getting exposed, I got off the plane in Tampa. In Tampa, you could take a rapid test right then. And I went and took a rapid test. I worked the week with my teams in a mask, social distancing, because I didn't know what exposure I could have had in Detroit airport before I got down to Florida. Even though my rapid test said negative, if you show symptoms or you're exposed right now, most places are going to say you need 2 negative tests within 24 hours with the rapid test, because we don't have the best system in place. So on top of that, what else can I do? I can take my temperature every day. You can get forehead thermometers now, and you can get whatever thermometer you want. But if I'm taking my temperature every morning, and I actually take it twice a day. I take it when I get up, and I take it before I go to bed. And if it's not 100.4, that's another good thing. That's more for me because I am a fat guy, and I'm sure I could probably beat this thing. But in a first world civilization, if I can see those symptoms and I go get a Z-Pack, I go get a low grade steroid, I get on top of it immediately, we beat it, because that's what we're seeing is a 98% survival rate. But the immune impaired, those who ignore it, those rural areas right now that we're seeing people getting sick and then ending up on ventilators. Hell, there is Rob Bruce with Whole Products, one of the best dudes in this industry at helping you get things. I love that guy. It took him down in July, and he ended up in ICU. And Rob is much more fit than me. And when Rob and I talked about it, he goes, you know what? I think I got it from one of the hotels I stayed in Northern California that wasn't doing their things right. So here we are, second wave. This thing is going to get published today, October 31st. And you can think about it. We've been talking about this. And this isn't the scary Halloween episode I wanted to have, but we have a responsibility for humanity to do the things that are right, which is wear a mask, sanitize, follow good hygiene. Dave, take it away. You can hit hard on this with everything you guys do in the facility right now.
Yeah, here's what's going on right now, right? And I get it. Everyone has something called COVID fatigue because you've heard about it so much. And the country got open a little bit, and people got just that little bit of taste of what things should be, or normalcy, or whatever you want to say. And they said, well, this is what I want, right? So they're not wearing masks all the time. Not everybody. I want to clarify. The exposure from me was more or less from my son. My exposure, he came over, said goodbye. I wore my mask. I did what I was supposed to do. I wear an N95 and a cloth mask, both together, every single day at the site. More for other reasons. Some of the N95s that you're able to get that are not they're not quite what 3M was making. We'll put it that way, because those are going to the hospitals. The good ones are going to the hospitals. So the ones we have, I think they were using razor blades for the ear strap. So I wound up cutting the ear straps off and using my cloth mask over top of it, which, you know, it works and it makes it a lot more comfortable. But I wear that every single day, all day, unless I'm sitting at my desk. And we require everybody to have a face cover unless they're sitting at their desk. I had a gentleman ask me, do they work? I have a video. You can look it up on YouTube or whatever you want. It is Uncle Rob proves face covers work, right? He uses ether, starting fluid, which actually has about the same size, micron size drop as your
I'll share it. I'll share it on Drillers Tribe Facebook group. You and I posted that almost at the same time several months ago, and it was very good.
And I show that because the mask, if everyone wore them, if we all bought in immediately, we don't have this discussion now. This discussion's over because the virus is slowed to a point to where we're ahead of it, and it may be gone. New Zealand was able to get rid of it. Australia has it under control. Their population bought in. I don't care what your politics are, it doesn't matter to me, right? But what we do need to understand is I can't protect me, only you can protect me, right? Me wearing a mask doesn't help me, because if the virus, the actual virus itself, there's a possibility that there still can be exposure. So what we need to do is keep the virus from getting into the air. And that's what the masks are about. They're about stopping the virus from entering the air in aerosol form from your breath. And so all we can do to stop that is put a face cover, so that
wear it properly. Don't do
Yeah.
any of that
Yeah.
dick nose stuff. Wear
Yeah.
it
I
the
mean,
right way.
it can't be, not over your nose, but we put that on. If everyone has that, we stop the spread. If we do that, wash our hands. If we can get a hold of them, we wear nitrile gloves. If we can get a hold of them, if not, right? You handle something. Uh, you wash your hands and you sanitize anything you own that you handle and then somebody else is going to. And sanitizing originally was going to be a kind of an issue. It's not that bad. Right now, I'm using it at our work for anything that's an outdoor surface. There's a peroxide solution that we're using that comes in a bottle, and it wasn't very expensive. I want to say a couple $100 for a dispenser that goes on a slop sink that sucks it out of the peroxide bottle, makes the right concentration. So now you don't even have to mix it. You fill a spray bottle with that, and it's 30 seconds of contact time. We don't use it on the inside of things because it leaves a little bit of a film. But and we have LMIs and some other computers inside equipment we don't want it on. So we still use vinyl oxide for that. Not that I'm not trying to sell any product. You can still use bleach, right? But you want your bleach at a correct concentration. 80%, 90% bleach, believe it or not, it does not kill the virus, because if you use too high of a concentration of bleach, it's not persistent enough, so it wounds the virus and thickens its shell and makes it harder to get rid of. 80% bleach is more persistent, and so it'll last that 10 minutes of contact time bleach needs.
So
right?
you know what's crazy, Dave, by saying that? That's no different than a pH adjusted chlorination that we should all understand. That if we go in and we shock the hell out of a system, what happens to that microorganism? It goes dormant and it stops absorbing. And Dave's saying the same thing about this virus.
Right? So it's the same principles that we understand, right? We go ahead and we hit everything that we can every time we use it. It's not that expensive to, especially if we're using bleach. And bleach for a while was hard to find. Lately, when we have been buying it, we're going to Menards. Other places don't have bleach. Menards got a shelf full of it. They only let you buy so much at a time, but we're going to be mixing to what we need.
And it's be prepared, right? It's no different than our first aid kit. You know what? If in fact we are going to go into a massive second wave, the time is right now, this week. Go out and get the supplies that are necessary for your essential business to stay in operation. Because again, as us being groundwater professionals, us being this tribal industry, don't be that guy. Don't be that company that is the moment that we show that we can't be the professionals that all the rest of the essential services are being. And that means sanitizing, following Dave's guidance, following the CDC's guidance, following our local health departments.
You don't have to follow my guidance. Here's what I want you to follow. The EPA puts out a thing called List N, right? The letter N. Look up EPA List N. Find a product that you can get a hold of on List N, and it tells you not only what will kill the coronavirus, it'll tell you what its contact time is. It'll pretty much lay out, as long as you use it as per the manufacturer's recommendations, it'll lay it all out, what you need to do. And there's probably 45 or 50 products on it. There's something you can get a hold of. And so that's all I care, is that you get a hold of something that can help you do your job, keep your crews. You know what? Don't let your crews drive together, because it comes back to you can do everything right. Mask up. What you don't know is when that employee goes home, he can do everything right. I have teenagers. I can't guarantee those knuckleheads are doing what they're supposed. Have they been told? Have they been, guided? Yes. But short of sequestering them to the room, I can't guarantee that they're doing anything when they're away. So I have to assume there's a possibility that I could have contacts. So again, my temperature is taken every morning when I walk in the building. How do you feel? It doesn't matter what you have wrong with you. If it's got a cough, sneeze, sniffle, running nose, guess what? You shouldn't come to work that day. Hopefully it's not the coronavirus, and it goes away relatively quickly, right? But even letting the flu get loose in your company is going to especially right now, you get a guy who's got a cough, he shows up at a service job, and he's coughing. What is the impression going to be for the customer? The customer is going to freak out. Get out of my, So we have to think about, it's all about what we're doing. Our appearance to the customer, we have an obligation to keep them safe. If you go knock on the door, back up off the stoop and stand there 10, 15 feet away. So they feel they can open the door and things are being done in such a way. Have your mask on when you do it, 15 feet and a mask. You pose no threat to them. And it starts letting them feel that you're taking this serious, you're a professional company. You keep coming back, groundwater professionals. That's what we want to be, right? Groundwater professionals. Our website, Drillers Tribe, let's be the tribe that wins, right? The tribe's not a bad thing as long as you have the successful tribe.
Well, so tribalism, why I use tribalism is it's a developed culture. It is a culture of unity that is doing things right, doing things safely, operating. We are very important to the world, how we provide water, how we pull resources, how we get information. But that means we have to be socially responsible to humanity and do things right. So wearing your mask, to me, regardless of your thoughts on every bit of internet information, you can hold the door open for that little old lady or the mom and children, the person that, you can take that 8 seconds out of your day to allow them to go through the door first as you hold it for them, because it's the right thing to do. And that's how I feel about masks right now. I don't care what your opinion is. It's what humanity has to do together for the unity of that tribe to be successful.
And I can't agree more, right? By nature, water well drillers, pump installers, people that work in our industry are good, down-to-earth people who would do all those things that you were talking about, right? That old school mentality of, be an upstanding person. That's who goes into this. They are historically, farmers and salt of the earth people. So this just is an extension on that. And I'm going to segue to something else here that I think you wanted to mention. Salt of the earth, we had a loss. I thought your post was great where you put a tribe chieftain. Someone who was a direct result of me writing for National Driller, this podcast, right? None of it can happen. And especially for me, because Wayne Nash passed away, a gentleman who wrote for National Driller for a long time, was a driller. I don't know how many years he had in the industry. Do you know what his actual total years was?
You know,
He wrote for
easily 45 or 50.
right, and so I'll give you a couple things from me. I've read National Driller since I became a driller. I would read it. I used to go and I would read World According to Wayne, and I would read Porky's Whole Thoughts. Right, both gentlemen that you know you enjoyed reading what they wrote. Favorite story of mine was Wayne talking about how he learned. Wayne learned the hard way, literally the hard way. He got the opportunity to drill. He was working oil and gas, and he was working morning towers. It was at night. He would get in a situation, not know what to do, get in the pickup truck, drive to the nearest other rig, which was a competitor company, and ask that driller for advice. And if you can probably, I don't know what year this was that he wrote it, but you can probably look it up in National Driller Archives. He said he would tell the guy how he screwed up and then have to pick himself up off the ground because the guy cracked him, put him on the ground and tell him what an idiot he is. So he'd pick himself off the ground, and then the guy would go, okay, dumbass, here's what you need to do. And that's how he learned all the ins and outs, because he didn't want to admit he didn't know. So he would drive. He was asking somebody who wouldn't, right? But he paid in blood, right? But because it was that rough and tumble. It's what people think about when they hear about our industry, and we have a little bit of it. You know, I fast forward 18 years later, 15 years, whatever he wrote it, am asked to write for National Driller. Somebody who's on this podcast might have been, pushing for it, but Jeremy Verduzco asked me if I would write, and my response was this.
Wait. National Groundwater I think it was 2018, because I think you had been writing for us by 2019.
Yes.
Or you wrote all of 2019. So it was 2018
yes,
Groundwater. My favorite brewery in Las Vegas is called Hop Nuts, and it's not far from the convention center. And the next door place is an El Salvadorian restaurant that has amazing empanadas. So now,
and they really do have amazing empanadas.
It's become a tradition, because other than this year, for the last 3 or 4 years I've been going, Dave's been going with me for the last at least 2 or 3. It's me, Dave, Glenn Minyard, and then the National Driller troops show up. Sarah Harding, Jeremy, and Dean, who also passed away this year. And we're in there and we're drinking beer and we're looking at what the 2019 calendar looks like. And I always have enjoyed Dave's insight. And I went, Dave, hey, this is Jeremy, my editor. I think you should write for National Driller. Here you guys are. Have a beer and figure out how you're going to write together.
Okay, and let me explain something. This is the same way this podcast came about. Brock pushed till it happened. So anyway, Jeremy says to me, and my response is this, and is, I'm dyslexic, which I am, and I'm rough around the edges. So I'm not really sure that writing is for me. And Jeremy's response was this: if I can edit Wayne Nash, I can edit you. And I had nothing to say for that, because I respect Wayne, and to even be brought up in the same breath as somebody that I thought that much of, right? Really, I was like, yeah. He's like, hey, he's rough around the edges, but he knows what he's talking about. I would hope somebody somewhere someday says I know what I'm talking about. But that kind of spurred it. At that point, I decided, why not? Give it a try. At the worst, it's the worst articles they've ever gotten, and they say, yeah, we don't need your service anymore. And that was now, I guess, I've been writing for them. It's actually started. Uh, I wrote all of 2019. I think I have one or two in one. I think in 2018 possibly, but all of 2019 into this year. Speaking of which, that means that I've missed it. I have to write something this weekend because I don't have anything on my I have a deadline I got to meet here in a few days.
Deadlines are just guidance.
Yeah, this is the other thing that Jeremy has told me, that one of the two of us has never made a deadline hardly in his life. And it's not me. So
I make the next month's deadline. It's just his decision of when he publishes. No, I'm just kidding.
sure.
And um, there's two things here. Tomorrow is Dia de los Muertos, which is the Day of the Dead, the celebration of knowledge and spirit, and remembering, because the Aztecs, maybe the Incans, I think it's the Aztecs, they thought it was disrespectful to mourn the dead, and it was more of a remembrance. And I think that's a beautiful concept. And so Dave getting to write for Driller, John Schmidt, Porky, who we didn't even get to have a moment of saying, damn, we're going to miss that guy. He was just, gone. And, Piglet's still out there doing great work around the world. But to Wayne, Wayne started writing for National Driller in 2002 and shared every bit of knowledge that he had. And, his last article was, I think, May this year. And it was talking about diversification. So here's a 70-year-old man saying, yeah, things look weird right now with all the COVID going on, but you can still diversify. These are, if it's drill shafts or cathodic or geothermal, there are other places to go. He passed away October 23rd. His wife passed away about 2 months earlier, which had been really hard on him. They were best friends and had been married for 30 plus years. And a lot of us have reached out on social media, and there are some beautiful posts from his daughter and whatnot of Wayne. And there are two sides of Wayne. There is Wayne, the pillar of the community, and the man that dropped knowledge and awesome father and husband. And then there's the Wayne that we know on the back of the rig, giving us the no bullshit, hey dummy, this is what you need to do. The point I want to make is, as a tribe, it's our responsibility to share knowledge so that we all can be better. From today's discussions of, disfiguring injuries to, triage, confined spaces, suffocation is terrifying. What an awful way to die. To our other safety discussions, it's about us being better. I've had some great mentors in the industry. Why I write because of World According to Wayne. I write because Bob Brown, who's still alive, I think, retired from Bayreuth. And when I was young, he goes, young man, to be successful in this industry, we got to continue learning. We got to continue to share knowledge. And if it isn't written down, it never happened. He said that to me in 2007, and my first article in Driller was 2013. And I wasn't sure I knew what to share, but we share great information online right now. That's not an edited piece. We have this platform. You don't want to write, but you want to come on and you want to talk with us, because that's what Wayne did. He shared everything from his solids control knowledge to fishing to everything. And he helped us not have to do it the hard way, not have to have that same mistake. And we'll never forget him for that. He will forever be the godfather in the archives of National Driller, because he gave it all. He gave every bit of what happened in his career back to us. and we can all do that. And that's the beauty of having one of my best friends in the industry, Dave, right here writing. And there's other people. Jacob Fletcher is going to have an article this month in December of National Driller. You can share your story, and your story can be 500 words, can be 1,000 words. It's up to you. And you can share it in Worldwide Driller or Waterwell Journal or online. Like we see one of the guys from out west on the Waterwell guys page always has something he writes about scripture and water wells. And Wayne shared his knowledge. You can share your knowledge. We can share together. And it's about becoming a better industry. And that's from safety to drilling to being a leader to being a coach to a mentor. And you don't have to wait until you're 55 years old and 30 years in the industry to be the godfather, right? So, Wayne wrote 2002 to 2020, and we won't fill that hole other than several of us all contributing to make up for the knowledge of Wayne. The same Porky being gone. We got a lot of great legacy people right now that are at the ends of their careers. Dave said it, we're a rough and tough industry. Dominic Sinabazi, right? Dave, yeah. We've had enough podcasts that you've said his name. Let's both talk about a couple great mentors. And I just opened the door for you, but by now we all should be able to say that gentleman's name because he dropped some badass knowledge onto Dave, and then Dave has given it to us.
Well, it's, as far as mentors go, my first mentor in this industry, I haven't brought his name up, was a guy named Tom Salm, and he's passed away now. But I was working for a Geotech company. He was their kind of that ran all things drilling, eventually came back to him. And so when I was thrust into being a driller and I had to do something I had not done before, I wasn't sure of, I would call Tom, and Tom would talk to me, okay, so what you got to do, this and that. And, he helped me out quite a bit because he was steady. He wasn't that, what do you mean you don't know this, right? He was steady. Tom would go, hey, this is what you need. But beyond that, as I've started branching out, many of my mentors that may not be in the drilling industry. Drilling industry, but it's great. A good mentor is someone who's going to help you navigate what you need to navigate or give you knowledge you need. They don't all come out of your industry. My biggest mentor that's had the most influence on me, I hope he doesn't listen to this because, I don't like to be too nice to him, is Glenn, right? Without Glenn's insight, Glenn's help, and he didn't have he's a younger man than me. He didn't have a tremendous amount of experience, more than I did at the time when I came in. It seemed like he did because I was at zero and he had 4 or 5 years of instruction in there. But his career being in caisson drilling and cranes, a lot of the stuff blended over, and I was able to learn stuff I didn't know from him. I wrote all of those wire rope articles for National Driller. Those are all based on stuff that I learned from him as I was putting my program together. I've had a number of gentlemen that retirees that I would talk to that are older that would guide me and hold it. You might want to look at something like this, because I've been around, I've seen, and obviously same as you, same as most people here, my biggest mentor, the biggest person that I have in my life or did have in my life that I do things for. I still do things for because I think I come up short to my ideal of what he needs or needed or wanted is my dad. He established early on that right and wrong is finite. That's it. There's right and there's wrong. And uh, I've always held myself to try and meet all of his and in everything from raising kids to the way I conduct myself so that people don't see me in a non-positive light. Um, and I think everybody has somebody like that. And if it wasn't your dad, maybe it was an uncle or someone who took you under their wing, or at least I hope for you that you had someone like that. I still don't ever feel that I've measured up to what I should to honor it. But in order to get better, you have to have something to strive for. So, do those things to make the people you care about proud.
Absolutely.
If you can do that, then you'll have a good life.
Yeah, and I was lucky, and I've said this before. I didn't jump head first into the drilling industry, and being the middle son, um, my father and I, he was my dad, and he supported me, but it wasn't until I was 19 or 20 that we became friends, and he got to really drop some knowledge on me. And he was a Vietnam vet, United States Marine who got the Navy Cross in Vietnam. And 2 weeks later got blown up in Vietnam from a booby trap and a whole new unit, because most of his unit, when he was there during the Navy Cross situation, um, got sent home. And he spent 11 months in Great Lakes Naval Hospital being rehabilitated before he came home. And so for that man to have seen all that he did before he got into the drilling industry, we got awesome veterans from Vietnam, Korea, Iraq, and now Afghanistan that are building this industry, helping us, that have great discipline and honor and want to be part of that have shown great ways and mentorship. The guys at Bayreuth, from John Christ to Jeff Blinn and Brian Coles, and Ed Anderson, Bob Brown, all of the senior guys, Jack Sowers, especially Kirby Donald, those guys pulled me under their wings and showed me everything. There wasn't one trick that they didn't want me to not know. It was like, how quickly can I get you up to speed so that you can go do that goofy job in Latin America? Um, and it's gone on that way, and it's all we can do is ask. So I think there's some people out there that don't view me as a mentee, or that I see them as a mentor, that I ask questions and we just have these great reciprocal conversations about um, how to solve a problem, or life, or family life balance, or mental health, that they are. Jeff Garby with Alucast, just the things that he wants to promote and do, and he's striving to pass on knowledge. And that's I called Wayne a knowledge broker. He with very little incentive back to him, would give you what you needed to be successful. Um, Dave and I take text messages and emails and things, and will pass on, or will say, you know, you need to reach out to this person. You know, it's funny because I've been in situations where somebody have went, well, what makes you the smartest drilling guy out there? And I've never claimed once to be the smartest guy out there. What I can do is I can put you in contact with a Dave Bowers, with a Jeff Blinn, with a Jimmy Silver's service guy with Jeffco, those type of situations, or Rex Penry. Those people are what make me good, because I can ask them for help, and then we can continue the information. And sure, if you're writing it down, one of my favorite quotes and why I write is, the faintest ink is stronger than your best memory. So by me writing it down, by us doing these podcasts, by sharing this, it's forever, because the cloud is real, and it's scary, and it will be there up in some sort of Skynet type situation for the rest of our lives. But it's cool because it's now at the palm of our hands. And in the 21st century, with these cool things that we got right here, we have that access to a good mentor, good knowledge, everything we need. And that's Wayne does that. John Schmidt does that. Marvin, who wrote Art of Water Wells, does that. There's infinite amount of people out there right now. There's almost 700 people in the groundwater professionals page. You look, there is a dozen past presidents of the NGWA on there that will selflessly give you advice and insight. And it's crazy. The groundwater professionals page started because I wanted a discussion board that could stay on topic of where we wanted to go. And it was something that Jeff Williams with Spafford Well Drilling, you know, the McElhenney speaker for the year, that goes, you know what, we just need to be able to stay on topic. And, you know, we got other places that we can do that. And we put it together that way. And it's a great resource. And there's a lot of international people on there. I get, for every 2 or 3 Americans, we get, you know, 4 or 5 or 6 international individuals. And I've gotten messages that have went, well, isn't this a North American page? What are we doing? But guys, the global water crisis, it's global. We think right now this virus that we're trying to kick butt is a big deal. Where we're going to be in 2030 to 2050, and the knowledge that we have to bestow so that we can continue to provide water for the rest of the world, is now. And we have the technology and the intelligence and the Wild West mentality to get it done, that we have to share with Niger, Africa, with Cape Town, Africa, with Caracas, Venezuela. You look at the places that were in crisis mode, we are all they have. I'll get off that soapbox.
Yeah. Well, back to our mentors, right? The names that you gave, what are the age of these people? This stuff, if we don't ask now, if we don't try to get what they know now, we have to learn it again. Right? I have a gentleman, I write safety. I don't consider myself a great safety resource, but I know some guys who are. A retiree named Chris Tomlin that was working with Glenn for years before he retired, that I can call Chris and he can recite what you need to look here. This is what you need to find. He may not know it by heart, but he knows where everything is and how to find it and what has been going on. that stuff, unless you talk to those people, it'll never be back until we learn it again. Why are we learning things twice? Right? We have that knowledge. All we have to do is ask them to unlock it. Most of them will. But they're not going to just offer it because most of them, again, back to salt of the earth. You don't feel like you're the smartest guy in the room most of the time. I know I'm not the smartest guy in the room most of the time. So I speak up when I feel it's pertinent. But a lot of times there's always that guy who, hey, you know what? What about that old cable tool driller that, wants to see the rig once in a while, or this, that, walks in and wants to see that vintage equipment? Those are another good resource to find vintage equipment shows. Go to vintage equipment shows, and you'll find guys with cable tool rigs and stuff that have restored it. You start talking to those people that have that old tractor, that old whatever. There's usually a story behind that. And sometimes you could find somebody who could help you out with some knowledge, right? I diverted from my original direction that I was going with this comment, but that's what it is. We're an aging industry. We need the new generation to push things into the 21st century, but to do that, they have to unlock what that generation before us learned, so we don't make the same mistakes a second time.
You're right, and I think this is a great point of wrapping up this episode. I write right now for the next generation. I write for everybody that's about to be a beginner into building themselves up to an expert. And with that knowledge sharing, the groups of friends that I bring together, like Dave, Tom Howe, Jeremy and I's other podcast stuff, Drilling Insight, is all about the steps we're going to have to take to close that age gap, because we have a gap, and we don't have time to develop 30 years into experts, because as we see these great men and women leaving our industry, retiring, passing away, we can't fill it fast enough. So every bit of what 2020 has been for me for writing this year and sharing has been about how can leadership work with the Gen Zs and the late millennials, and how can we as an industry break that tribalism, make a culture that works with mentors, with the knowledge that Wayne's there. It's there, right? Like, instead of 1989, as we were out on drilling rigs, and I sat on a slump tank when I'd skipped school with my dad because I was 9 years old, but there was no Facebook, digital magazine apps, any of that stuff. There was the present now, and that was very great for learning. But now we can still have the present now with all of this technology and information that, like Dave just said, we don't have to learn it the hard way. And that's my final point for this Halloween. Dave?
I've made my final point, so all I have to say is it is Halloween. We are putting this out today, so if there is trick-or-treating going on in your area, consider doing things a little differently than you've normally done. Set a bowl out on your step a few feet away if they are trick-or-treating. You leave the door open so you can see the kids. The main door, leave your screen door shut so you can communicate with them, this and that, tell them they look good because they live for that kind of thing. But limit the contact between yourself and anybody else Wear a mask if you're out with your kid. Let's do this sensibly so that the kids can have fun, but we restrict the spread of this virus. With that, I just want to tell everybody I'm honored that we're able to bring this to you every time we are. I'll put something about it coming out today on Facebook, and keep turning to the right, stay safe, and be happy.
Thanks, Dave. You can reach us at drillerstribe.com, DRILLERS tribe.com. There's a Facebook group out there, Drillers Tribe. There is also Groundwater Professionals and many other great social media pages. From the social distancing Halloween thing, I've decided to set up a 300, 200 compressor, and I'm just going to mortar candy to the children. So I hope they're wearing safety glasses, because we will be social distance, and it's going to be raining candy down here in Tallahassee, Florida. That way those little germ bags can't even get close to my house. Have a great weekend. Be safe and wear a mask, because this thing isn't over, but it could be. So if bitching that you couldn't go to Applebee's and eat chicken fingers amongst the bar and all your friends, and that's why we're going to go into Christmas holiday season wearing masks, just think about that. Let's be smart. Have a great weekend. Thanks, everybody.
Bye.